So I'll just start with a small introduction here as people are just arriving and landing. So this is the third webinar in a series that I'm calling Uncertainty Discomfort, or Certainty Comfort, or any combination thereof, of looking at what are students certain about and what things make them uncertain, and how comfortable are they, perhaps comfort in the certainty, but also can we work on using the discomfort to help them engage more constructively with the uncertainty, or help them move to being able to be more in comfort in uncertainty. And so we're doing, at the moment, I've invited a series of different people with a different view, a different perspective on these issues, because there's a lot of different things that make us certain or uncertain, comfortable or uncomfortable. So our guest today is Dr. Nina Bohm, who has studied at TU Delft. So she did her first degrees at Delft with a joint degree in science education, and then initially started working in science education, and that involved designing some challenge-based learning, some interdisciplinary learning. And then she returned as a doctoral student at Delft to then document that work. And so that's what she's presenting for us today, is based on her doctoral work, which was defended in November. So Nina's topic is on educating uncertainty in times of sustainable transition. And the little, I think probably most of you have seen this, but the little, what are you going to get out of this? What is Nina going to tell us about? So ideas on how you build uncertainty and a scaffolded uncertainty into a learning environment, and thinking about uncertainty both on personal and conceptual levels. And then also the opportunity that we're here co-located temporally, if not physically, and to have an opportunity to actually have some discussions, some exchanges, to connect with some other people that are doing some work that interests you or have similar difficulties or problems. And so Nina has built in some questions and some interactivity for us as an opportunity to actually benefit from being here temporally co-located together. So I'm going to hand over to Nina now.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation to be part of this series. We were just before discussing how challenging it was for Ciara to reach me, but I'm very happy that it all worked out and that I can be here for me in the afternoon presenting on my my PhD research topic. And I'm still getting used to people introducing me as a doctor. As mentioned, I defended my thesis in November last year. I'm very excited to share some of the work with you today. And as promised, I'm also going to open up the floor for you to have some opportunity to engage with the work itself. And that's actually what we're going to start off with right now, because I would really like you to engage with the topic of uncertainty. And I think the best way to get started is to start with your own associations with this word and concept right now. So you can either scan the QR code, or maybe I know. We can share the link in the chat. Oh, you already did. Excellent. Or just go to wooclap.com. Oh, that's really nice. Unpredictability is part of the theoretical framework I'm going to present in a minute. So that's spot on. I don't know who that's from. So please let them coming. Oh, anxiety. I find that a fascinating part of uncertainty as well. I wasn't really sure if it would work as a word cloud. Let's see if that's a little bit more difficult, because I think all your associations with the word might be quite unique and diverse. Yeah, I'm happy to see that it's something. Oh, unpredictability is becoming quite a big part of uncertainty. We'll see in a minute that it's not the only kind of uncertainty, but it's good to know that you see that as a big topic. Unsure, the unknown, a lack of certainty, vagueness, doubts. I like that as well. All right, I think it looks like we're already off to quite a good start here. Decision making as well. Yeah. Yeah, so I hope throughout the presentation we'll also be able to connect to some of those associations, and you will also be able to think about how uncertainty plays a role maybe in the part of education that you, or the education that you are part of yourself, in whatever role you have there. Let me see if I can switch back to the presentation, and I'll actually start with my introduction to the topic. I want to start speaking to you today with something Greta Thunberg said in one of her many gripping speeches. And it is something that has kept me thinking about our role as educators within engineering education. And it's one very specific quote. And what is the point of learning facts within the school system when the most important facts given by the finest science of that same school system clearly mean nothing to our politicians and our society? And I think it's quite a statement if you think about it as an educator. And I think it's also quite telling that Greta, as a 15-year-old, chose to stop going to school as a way to raise attention for the climate crisis. Not only because it tells us something about, I don't know, young activism and the power of a young voice like that, but also because she apparently used her stopping of going to school as her way to raise that voice. And I think in a way she has a point, or apparently she feels that way, that we as schools, but maybe also us as higher education institutes, we seem sometimes quite far away from the challenges that the world is facing, or we might not be as capable as being clear about why education is so important and why it cares about these challenges. And I think there's an assignment for higher education in this quote of Greta, and an assignment to change the way that we teach in order to keep education relevant in the context of all these big sustainability challenges that the world faces. And I'm then thinking about transitions such as renewable energy systems, circular built housing, or fighting heat stress in cities, but also the questions of what you might call social sustainability or justice in sustainability. And I think also it's important to think about those kind of topics in the context of engineering education. In any case, in the face of these challenges, I think there is a question of how should we educate for change to make sure that that also Greta wants to go to school again. And thinking about that change, I've made use of this visual comparison a lot during my research. I think currently education looks a little bit like a swimming pool, or we have many parts of education that look like swimming pools. If you learn to swim in a swimming pool, everything is sort of optimized for learning effectively and efficiently, swimming in straight lines, clear lanes, measurable laps. The outside world is kept outside of the swimming pool. Your teacher is not in the water with you, but is standing on the side. Looking in, you could even say that this swimming pool looks a little bit like one of the rubrics that you might use in your own education. And thinking about connecting to the challenges of the outside world, I think education might look a lot more like this. like open water swimming, learning to swim in the sea, which is unpredictable. Um, and I think it also invites a lot more uncertainty to our learning environment. And I think you can learn to swim in both situations, but the open water swimming might lead to a lot more adaptive swimmers than the very straight swimming lanes. And in any case, uncertainty plays a more important role, or maybe a different role, in this type of education than in the previous swimming pool. And I think as a starting point, it might be nice to look up in the dictionary what uncertainty then actually means. So that's what I did. And I think what you find there is uncertainty can be two things. It can both be a feeling, the quality or state of being uncertain, and doubt, which was one of the associations that you also had. My dissertation started from the idea that I would look into the second part of uncertainty, namely that something can be uncertain, so that things are uncertain. So the idea was we invite those challenges from the outside, we invite them in, and those challenges are uncertain, so students need to learn to deal with that uncertainty. But I think it's very hard to look at uncertain things without taking also the emotion of uncertainty into account. But more about that later. To explain a little bit, maybe the model of the educational change that I was just describing. I think education in its most basic form looks a little bit like this. A teacher and student interaction. And what I was describing of the open water swimming and what I've been researching also as a model in my dissertation is the introduction of a commissioner, or what we would maybe say also transdisciplinary education, where the challenges of the outside world enter our educational learning environment. And this commissioner that is bringing in a challenge, a question, a case, something in my research often a sustainability challenge, something related to what I was describing about maybe the energy transition, or maybe the way that we build cities, green infrastructures, the way we use food, and thinking about these things in an engineering systems type of way. And in transdisciplinary education, it's about how those challenges are being used to educate students to learn new skills and knowledge. And within that challenge is the uncertainty that's also being invited into the learning environment. And so the question was, what is happening there? How do we make use of that uncertainty as a way to learn and to teach? And to formulate that in a coherent research question, how can transdisciplinary education be designed so that students learn to deal with uncertainty in sustainability questions? And that is the research question that I have been dealing with the past 4 years. And to structure that a little bit in something that is also easy to understand in this short afternoon that we have together, there are actually maybe 3 questions that I looked at. What is uncertainty? We already had a little bit of an insight on that. How do students deal with that uncertainty? And then the question that we also might engage in together, how do teachers deal with uncertainty? And to maybe get started with that first question, what is uncertainty? I'll take a sip of water just for a second. I made use of an already existing model about uncertainty, and I think maybe also speaking in an engineering context, this is a relational model to uncertainty. So it considers uncertainty as something that is constructed between people, which kind of fits also the perspective of looking on it from this sustainability transition type of thinking. And within this model, there are three ways of looking at uncertainty. And this might be the one that we, as scientists, generally know a lot about, and also maybe in an educational context, this is something we are very much invested in, that our knowledge is incomplete. So there are still so many research questions and out there. And one of the certainties is that we do not know everything. And so next to this kind of uncertainty, there are also two other kinds of uncertainty that I think are important to consider in a sustainable learning environment or in a transdisciplinary learning environment. One is, as you predicted, unpredictability. So our lack of being able to tell what the future is. And in addition to that, a little bit more complex one, knowledge frame multiplicity. And this is the idea that we, even scientists, but also outside in the world, we do not view knowledge in the same way. We might have several knowledge frames to understand what we know. And these might also be conflicting. And so for students in a transdisciplinary learning environment, so when they engage with the outside world, with challenges, they need to consider that maybe they have a different view of what the problem is than the people that they are working together with. Considering those three different types of uncertainty, in my research, I looked into a learning environment where those three different kinds of uncertainty were part of the different challenges that students used. I decided not to go into complete detail on how we researched this, but I'm happy to answer any questions about it later on, because I wanted to move on to, okay, so these things are there in that learning environment, but how do students then deal with uncertainty? And so it's nice to have a picture in there of some of the students that were part of this research. I did my research at a very, I would say, unique education program, which was a collaboration between the TU Delft and Wageningen University, both in the Netherlands. And they collaborated to create this master program. It's a 2-year degree to educate urban engineers. So students who were very much engaged in urban challenges and had from different interdisciplinary backgrounds could work on those challenges. And the program had this very transdisciplinary idea about education. And I researched one of the courses, which was called the Living Lab course, in which students work on a challenge. So that kind of fits the model that I showed before. And to put a little bit of an insight in how students perceive those different kinds of uncertainty in this environment, I'll just read some of the quotes. So someone who is committed to biodiversity in the city finds it much more important, for example, than someone who is committed to vulnerable groups and heat stress. So that was about the weighing of those different consequences for those groups. And this gives a little bit, I think, an insight in how students reflected on knowledge frame multiplicity, for instance. And so one of the challenges in my research was, okay, how are we gonna figure out how students deal with that uncertainty? And one of the ways of perceiving it for me was very important that we would ask the students about their ways of dealing with it and reflecting on it themselves. And to understand how you deal with what you do not know, I kind of understand that as a metacognitive process. So it takes sort of to be able to reflect on what you don't know, it also takes knowledge about what you do know. So it's a little bit balancing between certainty and uncertainty. Or I would say sometimes uncertainty is what lies between what you know and what you don't know. And so this is a metacognitive process. So we used metacognition as the background for our interviews with students. And metacognition has two parts. So you need to be aware of uncertainty. And so we used a different model to describe uncertainty from Bruckner. Unpredictability, knowledge incompleteness, and knowledge by multiplicity. But then on the other hand, my question was, okay, but then what? You're aware of uncertainty, and then what happens? So that is the regulation part of uncertainty. And here we didn't really know how to specify that for uncertainty yet. So that is what we asked students. How do students deal with uncertainty? And in this very qualitative, I have to say small scale, well, maybe not small scale, but in this qualitative study, students described it in three, we found three different, let's say, global themes in which student describes how they dealt with uncertainty. And I thought that it was nice to see those results. The first one was that students described that they went seeking for help. They seek social assistance from teachers and each other. And I think this is a very human ability. If you don't know something, apparently one of our intrinsic behaviors might be that we ask someone else if they then maybe know the question, or at least that is what we observed with these students. And what was interesting to see is they asked their teachers, so the people from the university, and they also asked their students, so the people, their peers. The people they didn't ask so much for help were the people from outside of the university. Because they felt they had a different kind of relationship with them, sometimes maybe also felt they were more assessing them, or maybe were also judging how they were doing. So they felt less of a tendency to ask their commissioners for help, which in a transdisciplinary learning environment is interesting to know. What we also heard students say was that they employed small coping mechanisms for when they were stuck. So when when they were stuck in this sort of process of solving problems, figuring out how to deal with the complexities that they faced, we noticed that students described all kinds of small tools that they used to deal with that stuckness. And sometimes it was also stepping away from the work. So maybe having a drink with their peers, going out to play some sports. I could maybe say that it's sort of a brain management that they did, which I think was also a part specifically to deal with the uncertainty in those challenges. And lastly, and this one was very intriguing, we found that they developed some sort of attitudes toward uncertainty. Some were very flexible towards it, or saying, oh, maybe, well, it doesn't go this way, then maybe we should think of a different way of dealing with it. Others showed persistency. Well, the case, in this case, the commissioner just doesn't understand why our idea is so brilliant, and we should just tell them more often until they do understand. And what we also saw was some form of relativism, that in that complexity, it sometimes was also hard to keep faith in that they would solve the problem. And I think one of the students described it this way: I'm quick in thinking I don't know things, well, then all of it is nonsense. And I think this is an interesting quote because it also shows that having very much an increase of uncertainty in a learning environment can maybe also lead to things that you don't want to teach. And this is, I think, maybe an example. I don't think relativism as an attitude is necessarily something that we want to educate. But on the other hand, this is another quote from a student. If you do not know the answer to something, you find a way to accept this and deal with it and find a different way to approach the problem. And I think this might show an attitude that we do want to embrace, of flexibility, holding problems not too tight. And I think this is also so why uncertainty? Why do we invite it into the learning environment? And what are our goals with it? I think those are important things to think about. And to that end, it's time for some tiny interaction. I have a tiny uncertainty quiz, which you, I think, can use in the same with the same app. Okay, I think there we go. So I wanted to take the opportunity to let you reflect maybe a little bit on your own experiences, whether this is in education or maybe you're involved in curriculum or a designer or I don't know, you're working more on the organizational side of education. What would you say, which dimension of uncertainty is most important to you? And feel free also to there is, I think, a little opportunity to write down why or to give an answer next to this closed question. So I'm always interested to hear about your reasons.
I don't see that option.
Oh, you don't see that? Oh, well, maybe then I overpromised that.
Or maybe it's the next, I don't know if maybe there's like a subsequent step, but not in this step.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe then in the next ones that might come up. I thought it was so nice that you could give an explanation to your multiple choice answer. But otherwise, feel free to type that in the chat. If it's not too much switching between apps by now, but it might be interesting to read a little bit from each other why or how do you recognize those different models or those different perspectives maybe on uncertainty. I'll give you a little bit more time to answer. Oh, that's interesting. So I can see some of the comments that you posted here. The unpredictability of AI moving too fast, which I can very much relate to. Oh, sorry. Yeah, both of these comments I can also very much relate to. That complex challenges require students to be prepared to work on knowledge frame multiplicity and transdisciplinary education. It's really the reason that it's there. Yeah, I think looking behind the reasons indeed to work on transdisciplinary education, this knowledge frame multiplicity is also something that is hard to recreate in a different kind of education. You really need to go out there outside of the existing learning environment to engage with different perspectives. Yeah, I do think that's an important part of it as well. I really like the comment from Victor, if I can call you by your first name. I think all of them are very uncomfortable territory for engineers. I can relate to that as well. Yeah, And that's all three of them are important. Yeah, I always wonder if the knowledge incompleteness might be something that we do work on a lot more maybe than the other two. Or maybe, yeah, we deal a little bit more often with that kind of discomfort than the others. All right, I can talk about this model for ages, so let's move on to, I think, the next question. What kind of uncertainty skill do students need to learn then? So keeping in mind maybe your own answer on the previous question, if you think about that, what is maybe the skill? If these are the three skills, there might be many more skills. I don't know. But what would you, in your learning environment, would maybe like to focus on, or in your education or curriculum? What do you think is important? And then, of course, later on we'll move to thinking about how you then should support that learning that skill. Oh yeah, and also I wanted to post a note maybe here on using the word skill. I generally use the word competency, but I thought in this case I just make it a little bit more concrete by using skill. Nobody's thinking that asking for help is something you need to learn in learning environments too. I mean, I like it if you make clear choices, so no problem there. But yeah. Oh, thanks. Now we have one who is concerned with with asking for help. I thought it's always quite an interesting one also to have, as I always imagine, oh, would you have a learning goal, maybe saying in this after completing this course, the student is able to ask for help from others. I always find that sounds always like a very beautiful skill to gain from a course. And I can very much relate to the importance that we maybe as a community then pay to attitudes, which I think is also, again, the most maybe challenging or the most vague to learn to teach, both to learn and to teach. Because attitudes I find are quite personal, and how they are constructed is quite complicated or complex. I heard just, I have to think of the work from Ciara was just telling me about her PhD work, and I think maybe how those attitudes are constructed might be something that she works on. Maybe you can answer that question later on. Let me have a look at the comments. Yeah, an entrepreneurial mindset. I think that very much relates to what we're doing here. You could wonder, entrepreneurs, they might be really good at dealing with uncertainty. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I like that as a and I think it's also then maybe challenging to I do think it's something you might generally would like to avoid. So maybe our natural, I don't know, attitude towards uncertainty is to walk away from it. So I do think it could also take something of a learning environment to be able to support learning to become more comfortable in these discomfortable situations. Oh, I like the idea of self-efficacy in this category. For career development, yeah, I like that idea as well. More independency. Oh, I have already so much interesting perspectives on this topic. My computer is slightly slower than I would like. Ah, there we go. Elaborating. Yeah, I think this is very important. All of these also as to think of as future skills, specifically also for engineers who work on such integrated topics often. Okay, so in the last part, now we've all maybe in this tiny uncertainty quiz connected to what for you and in your education or learning environments that you're involved in, what is important to you. And in the last part, I would like to spend a little bit of time on how do teachers deal with uncertainty. And then I think it would be nice to open the floor a little bit for discussion. But I also want to get you to work on brainstorming about how teachers should deal with this. So we're also constructing a little bit this learning environment together. And in the last part of my research, I also did a lot of interviews, or this is from focus groups with the teachers. And one of the teachers, I think, wrote, I'm always a bit struggling with the format Living Lab. So that was the name of this course. I still find it pretty broad, and I don't know, I feel I master this format. So that makes me feel a bit insecure and improvising about how to support them best, them meaning the students. And I think this also shows an important factor of working with uncertainty in a learning environment, that also for the teachers, uncertainty becomes a very important part of their experience of the learning environment as well. Like as for scientists, it's uncomfortable to be with the unknown, I think. And as a teacher, especially, you might want to teach on the things that you know a lot about, or that you feel certain about, and not as much about the things that you are uncertain about. And so thinking about how to support students in this process of learning these skills that you might need to be able to stay with uncertainty or to feel more comfortable in discomfortable situations. We use the idea of scaffolding. Especially in my, I worked a lot related to urban design and architects, and all their association with scaffolding was always this kind of scaffolding. But then this word is also being used in the context of education. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with scaffolding, it means sort of build temporary support. So a scaffold in which a student can safely a child can safely practice a skill, and then you get the support. You also fade the support away once the student has become more capable. And in our research, we used the model that describes 6 different kinds of uncertainty of scaffolding. And I'm shortly going to walk you through it, and then hopefully maybe you also recognize yourself using those dimensions of scaffolding. The first one being recruitment, so getting students interested in a task. Reduction in degrees of freedom, simplifying the task so the student is able to perform it. Direction maintenance, making sure that students don't deviate completely from what they're working on, that they're actually answering the questions that they were looking for. Marking critical features, making visible what students are learning, and making sure that they then know how to proceed to get to the next stepping stone in their learning process. Making sure they're not completely frustrated and abandoning the task for it. And the last one, which I think is also interesting in terms of higher education, is demonstrating. Performing a task yourself, so the students are able to imitate the way that you are doing the task. And so in this final study in my thesis, we asked teachers to use or to describe what they did by making use of these different scaffolding dimensions. Because in those sort of open courses, let's say, the open water again, it's sometimes not as concrete how the coaching of teachers happens. And just to give some examples of that, one teacher described, in terms of frustration control, I provided multiple suggestions that would allow them to pursue a direction they are passionate about while preventing tensions with the commissioner. I think this is also a nice example in the context of transdisciplinary education, where teachers really need to balance all those different ambitions of different people being involved, maybe not only those of the students. Thinking of having your perspective again on this, I thought this might be a nice opportunity to brainstorm together a little bit. I know that scaffolding, some of you might be familiar with it, and then it's very easy to relate. But if you're not familiar with it, it's a little bit, it's a lot of information maybe. So I thought of making it your own. If you would think of being in a classroom, or maybe guiding your own project of students who are working on this very challenging sustainability challenge, how would you spend your time with those students? So if you think of those different scaffolding that you could perform, maybe think of how would you divide your time? How much of it would you spend on making sure students are interested in what they're doing? How much of your time would you spend on marking how far they have gone in their how they are performing on their learning goals? If you have your own experience, it might be a nice way of reflecting on how you think what your coaching is like. How often do you perform a task yourself to show to other students how they should do this task? I think that's one that we maybe not reflect on as often as teachers in higher education. But it's important to think about that teachers are important role models. Yeah, I'm curious. Oh, that is nice. Something is already happening here. Oh, there's a lot of grading happening. Marking the critical features, very important for teachers. Oh, it's interesting to see that the recruitment is also scoring quite high. I didn't see that as much in the group that I studied, or that was the teachers that were involved in the study. We saw there that frustration control is very important. Or very important was something that people spent a lot of time on. Oh, nice. Oh, I can see that I can also sort which ones are scoring, I think, highest. Yeah, feel free again to, if you filled in or if you divided your time here, to leave some comments maybe in the chat here in Teams on what your considerations maybe were or are. Yeah, it's interesting to see. In the study that we did, we saw that students were, or that teachers were spending a lot of time on direction maintenance. That in these maybe more open projects, students were quite quickly maybe getting interested in this one side track path that was not so much related to sort of the central topic or central research question that they formulated in the project. So it's interesting to see that you have a different perspective when it comes to guiding students through uncertainty. Oh yeah, I like the comment about not preventing frustration, but turning it into something either motivating and fun. Yeah, or encourage them to see the frustration as part of the mental task that they are doing. Yeah, nice. So as a last little assignment that I've got for you, thanks so much for engaging also with the topic itself, which I know takes a little bit more effort than just listening to the story. This one, I did some hard work in WooClap to actually be able to make this little scheme. Here you can find the 6 categories within scaffolding. And I would like you to think of one activity, so you don't need to think of something for each 6 of them, that you would like to integrate in your own education to make space for uncertainty. And you could also think of one thing that you could do. Maybe you're teaching a course right now that you could do next week or this week to make space for discussing uncertainty. You could also think back to the uncertainty skills that we talked about, helping students to ask for help or helping them to do a little bit brain management or reflecting on how they are dealing with being stuck, or more challenging, how to deal with their different attitude shifts. Yeah, so take a moment to brainstorm a little bit with yourself and write down one activity in either one of the categories. Oh, there's some nice things popping up here. I like the idea of visualizing both and normalizing through examples. I wonder what kind of visuals you would like to use then. What would that look like? And also normalizing, will that mean that you'll be talking about uncertainty yourself? Or, I don't know, just starting by asking the question, what do you feel uncertain about at the moment? I think is also quite an interesting question to ask, just to get the topic going or to check in with students on what is challenging. Oh, so many interesting ideas. Use puzzles. Oh, I like that idea a lot. Oh, sorry. There we go. Decision trees. I also, some of the teachers in the study that I did that as well. It also helps students to provide insight what decisions to make next, to sort of make an overview first and then help them what the best track to follow is. Really nice idea. Yeah, reminding them of the goals and stating the goals is, yeah, it's so central to I think a productive learning process. Yeah, also especially or also when you're working with personal learning goals for students. Yeah. Oh, I like that you are also making use of the like button. Oh, yeah, because I also wanted to have some time for the Q&A, and we're also running out of time, I see. I want to move to the last part of my presentation. This was just a small note that I wanted to add. So I hope this gave you some insight into this type of transdisciplinary learning environment and how uncertainty plays a role in that. I hope it's a little bit clearer what uncertainty, what metacognition, and what scaffolding is. And if you're really interested in what I found, then have a look at the thesis or reach out to me. These were some of this is sort of the final model that I presented in my thesis, which you'll hopefully, based on this 1 hour, be able to relate to. Then as a final statement, it's quite challenging also as teachers, as researchers, as students to talk about uncertainty. I think it takes courage. And sometimes, we can also feel overwhelmed by it. It's not an easy emotion to make space for. And in that process of reading a lot about uncertainty, I sometimes also relate it to not only scientists or philosophers, but also to novelists. And these are the final words that I would like to end this presentation with. From one of my favorite authors, Matt Haig. In short, we never know. The only certainty is uncertainty. And so, if we are to reach any kind of constant comfort, we need to find comfort in uncertainty. And it is there, because while things are uncertain, they are never closed. We can exist in hope, in the infinite, in the unanswered and open question of life itself. And I hope this has been a hopeful presentation as well, and that you'll be able to think about uncertainty in a hopeful way in the coming week when you think back to this presentation. Yeah, so that's it from my side for now. I'd love to get into some questions or whatever we have still time for in the last 7 minutes.
Great. So I just wanted to first of all, thank Nina very much for this presentation today. I think it was very exciting and interesting on many different levels. And I hope that several of you will have a moment to stick around and continue the conversation. I hope that some of you will also be able to be back in March. Johannes Strobel will talk to us about compound problems, humility. I've got windows over top of my thing here and I can't see anymore. All right. So Johannes Strobel will be here in March talking about slowing down processes. And Johannes Strobel is at the University of Texas in El Paso. And Fiona Rao from the University of Toronto will be talking about making learning from failure accessible to all students. So that uncertainty and how questions of equity, power, and privilege influence our ability to deal with uncertainty. So in terms of this overall project, we're in phase 1 right now of looking at lots of different types of uncertainty and having this lovely little tour, which I'm totally enjoying. And I hope that several of you are enjoying coming along with me on this. In 2020, maybe this fall around SEFI or something, moving to a suggestion of maybe trying to connect and construct to see if there's any collaborations or things that we want to work on together, with the idea for SEFI 2026, perhaps maybe it's a symposium, maybe it's a special issue journal article, but thinking about where we might want to go after that. So I'm delighted to have you with us today. And I'm going to, so if you need to get on to the next part of your morning, afternoon, or midnight, thank you so much for being with us. And if you're able to stick around and visit and ask Nina some of your questions, that would be absolutely lovely. Thank you so much for being here today.